In this course, I have included 7 different types of breads, 7 different types of doughs. First, we will be baking burger buns, then cheese stuffed herb rolls with 50% of wholemeal flour, then garlic twist, a garlic pull-apart loaf, focaccia, a multigrain loaf, and everyone's favorite cinnamon twist. Now, before we start with the recipes, I want to answer 3 major questions that's often asked about bread baking. Firstly, how long should the dough be kneaded? How do we know that the dough has developed a strong gluten structure? The answer is very simple. There are 2 tests which you can do. Firstly, a bounce back test. That is, when you touch the surface of the dough should bounce back. It shouldn't leave an impression. And secondly, we can do a window pane test. To do the window pane test, cut a piece of dough and stretch the dough. The dough should stretch without tearing. If the dough tears, then we have to knead for a longer time. Now, to the second question. How long should the dough be proofed? How do we know that the dough has done proofing? Again, the answer is very simple. Here you can do a right test. That is, you poke the dough and the impression should hold. The impression might slightly fill in, but that is fine. The impression should hold. That means the dough can be degassed and shaped. Now, if at this stage, when you poke the dough bounces back. That means the dough needs more proofing time. Leave the dough covered for another 10 to 15 minutes and repeat the test. Now, if the dough has overproofed, then at this stage, when you poke the dough will collapse. It is going to affect the texture of your bread. So we have to be careful about the proofing timings. And these proofing timings will vary depending upon the temperature. Now to the third question. How do we know that the dough is ready for baking? Again, the answer is very simple. Here we can do a right test, but this time around the right test is a little different. We do not poke the dough, we gently touch the surface of the dough. And at this point, there should be an impression, and the impression should slowly fill in. That means the dough is ready for baking. Now, if at this stage, when you touch the surface of the dough and the dough bounces back, then that means the dough needs more proofing time. Leave the dough covered for another 5 to 10 minutes and repeat the test. Now, if you have overproofed the dough, then at this point, when you touch the surface of the dough, there would be an impression and the impression will not fill in. That means you have overproofed the dough and your bread is going to be dense. There is nothing which we can do about it. So we have to be careful about our proofing timings. Now, these things will become much clearer once we start with our recipes. So let's start.